Emily Vargas had been driving since early morning, and the long stretch of Texas highway seemed to go on forever. The sun was bright, almost too bright, hanging above the quiet road like a lamp that refused to dim. She had planned this trip for weeks, imagining peaceful music, open skies, and maybe a few interesting stops along the way. What she hadn't planned for was her truck beginning to act strangely in the middle of nowhere. At first, she thought it was just the heat. The weather had been warm for days, and her old truck didn't always handle high temperatures well. But when she noticed the temperature gauge creeping higher and higher, she felt a prick of worry. She turned off the air conditioning and opened the windows, hoping to cool the engine a little. Instead, warm air rushed in, carrying dust and the faint smell of dry grass. She tried to tell herself everything was fine, but the truth was becoming harder to ignore. A few minutes later, the truck let out a soft, unpleasant hiss. Emily's heart jumped. She slowed down until the truck rolled to a stop on the side of the road. The engine made a low clicking sound, like metal settling after too much strain. Emily rested her hands on the steering wheel and released a slow breath. She wasn't panicking yet, but she was close. She checked her phone, hoping for a signal. Nothing. Not a single bar. She lifted the phone higher, turned in her seat, even stepped outside to try again. Still, nothing. The road behind her and ahead of her was empty, stretching into the horizon with no traffic, no buildings, and no help in sight. She looked around, shading her eyes with her hand. There had to be something nearby, anything. Then she saw it. Not far from where she had stopped, maybe a 10-minute walk down a dusty side path, stood a ranch. It wasn't new or fancy. The paint on the wooden house had faded. The fence looked worn, and the large barn behind it seemed older than everything else. But it was a place where someone might live, a place where she might find help. Emily hesitated. She didn't love the idea of walking onto a stranger's property, especially one in such a remote area. But her choices were limited. The sun was heating up. Her truck wasn't going anywhere. And she wasn't going to get a phone signal anytime soon. After a moment of thought, she locked her truck, took a bottle of water from the passenger seat, and started walking toward the ranch. The path was uneven, covered in small rocks and dry weeds that brushed against her ankles. The air buzzed with insects, and the faint sound of wind moving through tall grass followed her. As she walked, she wondered who lived there. A family? An older couple? Maybe a ranch hand working alone? She hoped whoever it was would be friendly, helpful, understanding. She rehearsed what she might say, hoping she wouldn't come across as nervous. By the time she reached the gate, her cheeks were warm and her boots were dusty. She stopped for a moment, taking in the scene. A few cows grazed lazily on the far side of the fence. A rusty windmill turned slowly in the breeze, creaking slightly with each rotation. The house itself had a strong, quiet presence, like it had seen decades of seasons pass by. It didn't look abandoned, but it didn't look busy either. Emily pushed open the gate, which squeaked loudly. The sound felt too sharp in the stillness, and she paused again, half expecting someone to appear immediately. When no one did, she continued toward the porch. Each step made her more aware of how quiet everything was. No barking dogs, no voices, no cars, just the soft crunch of her footsteps on dry earth. She reached the wooden steps leading up to the porch. Up close, she could see that the boards were old, but well cared for. Someone had swept them recently, and a pair of work boots sat neatly beside the door. Emily lifted her hand to knock but hesitated. What if no one answered? What if someone answered but didn't want a stranger bothering them? She took a breath and knocked firmly. For a moment, there was no response. Emily looked around again, feeling slightly awkward, standing alone on the porch. She was about to knock a second time when she heard movement from inside, the sound of footsteps and something heavy being set down. The door opened slowly, and a tall man stepped into view. He looked to be in his late 30s or early 40s, with sun-tanned skin and a tired but steady expression. His dark hair was messy from the wind, and his clothes were work-worn jeans, a faded shirt, and boots covered in dust. He blinked at her, as if surprised to see anyone standing there. "Can I help you?" he asked in a low, even voice. Emily nodded quickly. I hope so. My truck overheated on the road out there. I don't have a signal, and I was wondering if maybe you had tools or a phone I could use. I'm sorry to bother you." The man didn't speak right away. He looked past her toward the road, then back at her, studying her calmly. It wasn't an unfriendly look, just cautious, the way someone might look when trying to understand an unexpected situation. After a brief pause, he nodded. "You're not bothering me," he said. "Most folks don't come down this way, but you can use my phone. And I can take a look at your truck. Engines are something I know pretty well." Quote, relief washed over Emily. "Thank you. I really appreciate it." He stepped aside and opened the door wider. "Come on in for a minute. I'll get my phone." Emily stepped into the house, feeling grateful, but still aware that she was in a stranger's home. The interior was simple and practical wooden floors. A plain sofa, shelves filled with tools and books. The kitchen, visible from where she stood, looked organized but lived in. She noticed a few pictures on the wall, a couple of horses, an old family photo, and what looked like a younger version of the man standing beside his father. He walked over to a small table, picked up his phone, and handed it to her. "Signal isn't great out here, but you can try," Emily checked. Just as he said, the signal was weak, barely 1 bar. She tried calling for roadside assistance, but the call didn't connect. She tried again. Nothing. The man watched quietly, understanding her frustration. "It happens," he said. "Phones don't work half the time on this land. But don't worry. I'll come take a look at your truck. Might be something simple." She smiled gratefully. "I hope so. Thank you for helping me. I'm Emily, by the way." "Caleb," he replied. "Caleb Briggs." They walked back outside together, heading toward the road where her truck sat waiting. The sun was still bright, but the presence of another person made the world feel less empty, less overwhelming. Emily felt a small sense of comfort knowing she wasn't alone with her broken truck anymore. And though she didn't know it yet, this simple walk back to her truck was the beginning of a moment that neither of them would forget, one that would lead to discoveries, honest conversations, and the uncovering of things neither had expected to share. Emily walked beside Caleb as they moved across the dusty ground toward her truck. Even though they hadn't talked much yet, she could already sense that he was a quiet, steady kind of person. His steps were slow but confident, and he kept his hands in his pockets as if he was used to thinking more than speaking. It made her feel a little calmer, just walking next to him. When they reached the truck, Caleb stopped in front of it and looked at the hood with a thoughtful expression. He didn't rush. Instead, he listened to the soft, ticking sound the engine made as it cooled. Emily stood beside him, unsure if she should talk or give him space. The silence wasn't uncomfortable, though. It felt like he was simply studying the situation with care. "Mind if I open the hood?" he asked. "Go ahead," Emily replied, stepping back. Caleb pulled the hood release and lifted the metal panel slowly. A wave of warm air rose up, carrying the smell of heated engine parts. He leaned forward, his eyes scanning the hoses, the radiator, and the parts around it. He reached out and lightly touched a hose, testing the temperature. "Radiator's running too hot," he murmured. "Looks like it's working harder than it should." Emily swallowed. "Is that bad?" "Not the worst thing," he said. "But if you keep driving like this, it could get worse." She nodded, though she didn't fully understand. Cars were not her area of knowledge at all. She watched him examine everything, with careful hands, noticing how he seemed to understand each part by instinct, like someone who had spent years fixing engines and machines. After a moment, he stepped back and wiped his hands on his jeans. "Your radiator's too small for the kind of heat we get out here," he said. "It can cool the engine, but not fast enough on long drives in the sun. It overheats quicker." Emily tried not to feel embarrassed. "I didn't know. I've never really driven in places like this." He nodded gently. "Most folks don't think about it, Different areas need different setups for vehicles. No judgment there. Then he gave a small half-smile. The first one she had seen from him. But it'll be quick to fix. I can patch the leak and refill the coolant. Won't take too long. Relief filled her chest. Really? That would help so much. Thank you. Come on, he said. I've got tools in my workshop. You can walk with me. They started toward the ranch again, passing through the gate and back onto the path. The wind picked up a little, carrying the scent of dry earth and hay. Emily glanced at Caleb now and then. He had a calm way of moving, not fast, not slow, just steady. It made her curious about him. Do you live out here alone? She asked gently. For the most part, he replied. It's quiet. Plenty of work to keep me busy. She nodded. It must be peaceful. Sometimes, he said. Other times it's a lot to handle by yourself. But it's home. They reached the workshop. A large wooden building beside the barn. Up close, Emily could see that it was full of character old wood, metal siding, and large windows that looked dusty from years of weather. Caleb opened the door and motioned for her to follow. Inside, the workshop felt alive with history. Tools hung neatly on the walls, arranged by size and type. Some were shiny and modern. Others looked like they had been passed down from older generations. There were boxes of spare parts, shelves full of cans and containers, and a workbench covered in nuts, bolts, and small projects in progress. Emily noticed the air smelled of oil, wood, and old metal, an honest, hard-working scent. Caleb walked toward a large toolbox in the corner and started gathering what he needed. Emily watched him work with practiced ease, picking out tools without hesitation. She sensed this place was special to him, maybe even comforting. You've fixed engines for a long time? She asked. Since I was a kid, he answered, tightening a wrench in his hand. My dad taught me. We worked on tractors, trucks, anything that needed repairs. He said a rancher should always know how to fix his own equipment. Sounds like he taught you well. Caleb paused for a moment, then nodded softly. He did. There was a quiet emotion in his voice, something gentle and respectful. Emily didn't ask more. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable. Instead, she walked around the workshop a little, taking in small details. There were pictures of horses pinned to a corkboard, a hat hanging on a hook, a large map of the land, a notebook with sketches of machines Caleb had probably been planning to build or repair. The place felt organized, but lived in, like every corner had a story. Caleb returned to her with a small plastic box filled with tools. Ready? He asked. She nodded and followed him outside again. They walked the same path back toward the truck. But this time the walk felt different, less like strangers. More like two people sharing a moment in the middle of nowhere. When they reached the truck, Caleb knelt beside the engine, opened the toolbox, and got to work. Emily stood nearby, watching as he opened caps, tightened clamps, and checked each part with careful hands. The sun shone on his shoulders, outlining him in warm light. As he worked, he spoke without looking up. Where you headed? New Mexico, Emily said. I'm visiting my sister. She moved there last year. Caleb nodded slightly. Long drive? Yeah, she admitted. I didn't expect any trouble on the way. You never do, he said gently. But don't worry. We'll get you back on the road. Emily felt grateful, truly grateful. She didn't know him, yet he was helping her like it was the most natural thing in the world. She wondered if she would ever be as calm and generous as he seemed to be. After a few minutes of quiet work, he stood up and wiped his forehead with his sleeve. I'll need to refill your coolant, he said. I've got some in the workshop. Stay here, I'll be back in a minute. He walked back toward the ranch with long, steady strides. Emily watched him go, feeling a sense of unexpected trust building inside her. It was strange, she was far from home. Her truck was broken, and she was relying on someone she had just met. But something about Caleb felt safe, like he wasn't the kind of person who would leave someone stranded. While he was gone, Emily looked around at the open land around her. The windmill spun lazily. The cows continued grazing. The sky looked endless, a deep blue stretching across every direction. She felt a mixture of smallness and wonder, like the world was huge. But this moment was important in a quiet, gentle way. Caleb returned carrying a large container of coolant. "This should do it," he said. He worked again, pouring the liquid carefully, checking levels, tightening everything one last time. Finally, he stepped back and gave a small nod of satisfaction. "Try starting it," he said. Emily climbed into the driver's seat, turned the key, and the engine started smoothly. No strange noises, no warning lights. The temperature gauge stayed steady. A wave of happiness washed over her. "It works," she said brightly. Caleb smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Told you it'd be quick." Emily stepped out of the truck again. "Thank you," she said. "Really, I don't know what I would have done without your help." Emily stepped out of the truck. "Really, no trouble," he said. "Just glad you stopped when you did. Engine could have gotten worse if you kept going." She nodded, feeling even more grateful. But the moment wasn't over, because just as Caleb bent down to pick up a tool he had dropped, his eyes shifted toward the ground and he froze. Emily followed his gaze. There, beside her truck, hidden partly by dust and weeds, something unexpected was buried beneath the surface. Something that made Caleb go silent for a long moment, as though he recognized it immediately. Emily didn't know what it meant yet, but she knew the day wasn't as simple as she had thought. Caleb didn't move at first. He stood very still, leaning slightly forward with his eyes fixed on something near the base of Emily's truck. His hand, which had just reached for a tool, slowly lowered until it rested against his knee. Emily watched him carefully, unsure why his entire expression had changed. His calm face grew serious, not in a threatening or frightening way, but in a way that showed deep concentration, almost concern. Emily took a small step forward, trying to see what he was looking at. At first, she saw nothing but dust-covered grass and dry soil. But when she lowered her gaze a little more, she noticed a thin wooden board, partly buried and partly visible. It was worn, aged by weather, and its edges looked like they had been placed there intentionally, not by accident. The board wasn't large, but it was just big enough to cover something beneath it. "What is that?" Emily asked softly. Caleb didn't answer right away. Instead, he gently moved the board aside using just the tip of his boot, careful not to disturb anything too much. As the board shifted, it revealed a small opening in the ground, not wide, but deep. Emily stepped back a little out of surprise. Below the opening, she saw a narrow tunnel entrance. It seemed to go downward at a gentle angle, disappearing into darkness below the soil. The air rising from it felt cooler than the hot air above the ground, carrying a faint, earthy smell, like old wood in underground spaces that had been untouched for a long time. Caleb let out a slow breath. It wasn't fear. It wasn't anger. It was something else, something like sadness mixed with a sense of responsibility. "I should have covered this better," he said quietly. Emily swallowed, her curiosity growing stronger by the second. "What is it?" Caleb hesitated, then looked at her with an honest expression. "It's a tunnel. It goes down to an old underground room." "For what?" she asked. He glanced toward the ranch, then back at the opening. "It's part of the place. Something my dad built years ago. I haven't used it in a while." Something. She sensed he wasn't hiding anything dangerous or secretive. His voice held more emotion than she had heard before. Like each word carried memories he wasn't sure he wanted to revisit. "I didn't expect to see it today," he added. Emily crouched slightly, maintaining a safe distance from the opening, but trying to see more clearly. The tunnel was reinforced with wooden planks along the walls, forming a narrow passage leading downward. She couldn't see the end of it, but she could tell it wasn't new. Dust had settled along the edges, and spiderwebs hung in thin strands near the sides. It looked like something built long ago, not used recently. "You built this?" she asked quietly. "My dad did," Caleb answered. "I helped when I was younger. It was supposed to be an emergency shelter." A safe place in case of storms or wildfires. Back then, people around here prepared for everything. Emily nodded, absorbing his words. The idea made sense. Remote land. Unpredictable weather. Long stretches without help, yes. It seemed reasonable that someone might build a shelter underground, but Caleb's expression said there was more to the story. I used it again last year, he continued slowly. After the wildfire. Emily straightened slightly. She remembered hearing about wildfires in the news sometimes, but she had never thought about what they meant for people living directly in their path. Was it bad? She asked. Caleb's eyes drifted toward the horizon, as if he were remembering something he didn't talk about often. It was fast. Too fast. I got some of the animals out. Saved what I could. The fire reached the ranch before anyone had enough time to stop it. Emily's heart softened. I'm sorry, she said gently. That must have been hard. He nodded. It was. But I kept a lot of things down there. Things that meant something to my family. It's not fancy, but it kept them safe. He moved closer to the opening and crouched down, brushing aside a bit more dust. Behind the first few feet of the tunnel, Emily noticed something she hadn't seen earlier. Wooden boxes stacked neatly near the bottom of the slope, partly hidden in shadow. They were covered in dust, but still intact. Caleb looked at them as if they were old friends. I didn't expect anyone to ever see this, he said quietly. It's not something I show people. Emily understood without needing more explanation. This tunnel wasn't just a shelter. It was a quiet place full of memories, something Caleb had kept to himself. A part of his life he didn't share with strangers. She didn't ask to go inside. She didn't try to push him for more details. Instead, she stayed where she was, giving him room to breathe and space to talk only if he wanted to. After a moment of silence, Caleb stood up again. He brushed his hands together and looked at her with a mix of apology and trust. Sorry, he said. I didn't mean to get lost in thought. It just caught me off guard. No need to apologize, Emily replied softly. Anyone would pause if they found something meaningful like that. He gave a small, grateful nod. I guess that board must have shifted when your truck rolled in, he said. I thought I had covered it well enough. I didn't damage anything, did I? She asked. No, he said. Everything's fine. Just surprised me. They stepped away from the opening together, and Caleb replaced the board carefully, making sure it was secure again. Emily watched him work, noticing the careful way he handled each movement. It wasn't about hiding the tunnel. It was about protecting something fragile inside himself. When he finished, they walked back toward the front of her truck. The wind brushed gently across the field, carrying the distant sound of cows moving through the grass. The sky above them was soft, bright, and endless. Emily felt the atmosphere change, not in a tense way, but in a deeper, more understanding way. You okay? She asked quietly. Caleb gave a small smile. This one softer than before. Yeah. Just thinking about the past. She didn't want to make him uncomfortable, but she cared enough to ask, do you miss it? Before the fire? I mean, he let out a slow breath. Every day. But life keeps moving. You don't get to pause forever. Every day. Every day. Emily admired the strength in that sentence. She had met him only a short time ago, yet she could see that he carried a lot on his shoulders. And even with all that weight, he still helped her without hesitation. Thank you for helping me today, she said again, more sincerely than before. You're welcome, he replied. I'm glad you stopped here. She smiled. Well, I didn't have much choice. He chuckled softly at that, and the moment felt warm, like the beginning of a quiet understanding between them. You'll be able to drive safely now, he said. But if you want, you can rest inside for a bit before going back on the road. It's a long trip to New Mexico. His offer wasn't pushy. It wasn't strange. It was kind, simple kindness. From someone who had lived through a lot, but still chose to be helpful. Emily thought about the long drive ahead, the heat, the empty highway. Resting for a little while didn't sound like a bad idea. That would be nice, she said. Caleb nodded and gestured toward the house. Come on. I'll get you something cold to drink. As they walked away from the truck and the hidden tunnel beneath it, Emily felt something shift, not fear, not confusion, but something gentle and unexpected. In the quiet space of that ranch, she sensed that she had stepped into a part of Caleb's story he rarely opened. And without planning it, she was already becoming part of a day he would remember. Emily followed Caleb toward the house, walking beside him in the warm afternoon air. The sun had lowered just enough to soften the heat, casting long shadows across the ground. The cows were moving lazily near the fence, and the windmill turned with a slow, steady rhythm. The ranch felt peaceful in a way Emily hadn't expected, as if time moved differently here, slower, quieter, more thoughtful. As they stepped onto the porch, Caleb held open the door for her. Inside, the house felt cool and comforting, compared to the hot air outside. Emily noticed the simple layout again: wooden floors, a sofa that looked well used, and shelves lined with books, tools, and a few framed photos. Everything had a quiet sense of purpose, as if nothing was there without a reason. Sit wherever you like, Caleb said gently as he walked into the kitchen. Emily chose a chair near the small dining table. The chair was sturdy and a bit worn, but comfortable. She looked around the room more carefully now that she wasn't rushing or stressed. She noticed pictures of a younger Caleb standing with his father beside a horse, both of them smiling proudly. Another photo showed the ranch during better days: green fields, bright blue sky, and a barn that hadn't been darkened by time or loss. Caleb returned with 2 glasses of cold lemonade, handing one to her. It's not fancy, he said, but it's cold. Emily smiled gratefully. Cold is perfect. She took a sip, feeling the refreshing taste cut through the dryness in her throat. For a moment, neither of them spoke. It wasn't awkward. It was calm. Like 2 people simply sharing space, without needing to fill the silence. After a minute, Emily looked up. You mentioned the wildfire earlier, she said softly. Was that when things changed here? Caleb paused with his glass halfway to his mouth. He set it down gently and pulled out a chair across from her. When he sat, he leaned his elbows on the table and took a deep breath, as if deciding how much of his story to share. Yeah, he said. That was when everything shifted. Emily waited quietly. Caleb began speaking slowly, like he was guiding himself through memories he didn't revisit often. The fire came during the summer. We'd had months of dry heat, no rain at all. People knew the risk was high, but you can't do much except hope it stays away. Emily nodded. That must have been stressful. It was, he admitted. I was here alone when it started. My father passed away a few years before. Neighbors were a few miles off, but the fire spread faster than anyone expected. By the time I saw the smoke, the wind had already pushed it closer. He looked toward the window, his eyes distant but steady. I tried to save as much as I could, got the horses to a safe area, moved the cattle, grabbed tools, equipment, things I needed, but the fire kept growing. It reached the edges of the ranch before help could arrive. Emily could imagine it now, flames racing across dry grass, smoke filling the air, the sound of crackling heat and rushing wind. Loneliness must have felt heavier in those moments. What did you do? She asked softly. I remembered the shelter, he said. The tunnel you saw earlier. My dad and I built it for emergencies. We never used it back then, but I always kept it in mind. So I carried whatever I could down there. Boxes of old photos, things that belonged to my parents, tools my dad collected over the years. I saved what mattered. He ran a hand through his hair, not dramatically, but in a thoughtful, almost gentle way. The rest, well, some things I lost. The barn didn't burn completely, but parts of it did. Some fencing, some supplies. It took months to repair everything. Emily felt a sting of sympathy in her chest. That must have been tough, she said. I'm sorry you went through all that alone. Caleb gave her a faint smile, one that didn't hide the truth but acknowledged her kindness. I managed. That's what I do. But still, Emily said, that's a lot for one person. He didn't respond right away. Instead, he lifted his lemonade glass and took a slow sip. "I guess," he finally said, "but this ranch is all I've known. I couldn't just walk away." Emily admired that the loyalty, the strength, the quiet resilience. Not everyone could stay rooted after so much loss. She rested her hands on the table, choosing her words carefully. "You've rebuilt a lot," she said. "It shows. The place feels lived in, cared for." Caleb looked at her with surprise, as though he didn't expect anyone to notice or appreciate the effort he'd put in. "Thank you," he said quietly. "You're welcome." Another gentle silence passed between them, but this one felt warmer. Emily sensed that sharing his story wasn't easy for him, yet he trusted her enough to open up. That trust made the air between them feel lighter. After a moment, she changed the subject gently. "Those photos on the wall," she said. "They're beautiful. The ranch looked amazing." Caleb glanced at them. "It still is," he said softly. "Just different. The land comes back over time. Nature has its way." She smiled. "Kind of like people." He looked at her, and for a moment, there was something thoughtful in his expression, almost as if he was acknowledging the truth in her words, how people, like land, can hurt, survive, and slowly rebuild. "Maybe," he said. Emily finished her lemonade and set the empty glass on the table. "Thanks for the drink," she said. "And for the rest. I wasn't expecting my day to go this way." "Me neither," Caleb said with a gentle laugh. "I'm glad it was you here," she replied. "I think I would have been pretty lost otherwise." That seemed to touch him more than she expected. His eyes softened, and his shoulders relaxed just a little. "You handled everything well," he said. "Most people would panic being stuck on a lonely road." "I wanted to," she admitted. "But your calm attitude kind of made it impossible to panic." That made him smile again, small, subtle, but real. Caleb stood after a moment, gathering their empty glasses. "I should check your truck one more time before you go," he said. "Just to be sure everything's good." Emily stood too. "Okay." They walked outside together, the warm breeze brushing against their arms. The sun had started dipping lower, painting the sky with soft yellow tones. Emily could feel the day shifting toward evening, but she didn't feel rushed to leave. The ranch felt strangely comforting now, like a place that had opened a small door to her, just as she had unexpectedly opened a door to Caleb's story. When they reached the truck, Caleb inspected it again, checking the coolant, the hoses, and the gauge. He nodded with approval. "You're good to go," he said. "Shouldn't give you trouble for the rest of the drive." Emily smiled. "Thanks. Really. For everything." "You're welcome," he said simply, but as he closed the hood, something about his expression shifted again. It wasn't sadness this time. It was reflection, like he was thinking about what he had shared and what she had understood. Emily sensed that maybe he hadn't spoken about the wildfire, the shelter, or his father in a long time, and somehow, on this random day, he had ended up sharing those pieces with someone who had simply needed help on the side of the road. "Caleb," she said softly, "I'm glad I met you today." He looked at her, and this time, his smile reached his eyes. "Same here." The moment lingered, quiet, meaningful, warm, and even though the day had begun with frustration and worry, Emily now felt something unexpected inside her. A gentle connection, a sense of trust, a new understanding of a man who had weathered storms she couldn't imagine, yet still chose kindness. Emily stood beside her truck while the last warm rays of sunlight touched the land around them. The quiet ranch felt different now, still peaceful, but in a deeper way, as if it had shared something personal with her through Caleb's story. She looked at him, feeling grateful not only for the help with her truck but for the strange, gentle connection that had formed between them during the afternoon. Caleb closed the hood and stepped back, wiping his hands on a clean cloth he had brought from the house. "You should be able to reach the next town easily now," he said. "From there, you'll have plenty of places to stop if you need anything." Emily nodded, though she didn't feel the same rush to leave that she had felt earlier. "Thank you. Really. I mean it." He lifted his eyes to hers. "You don't have to keep thanking me," he said with a small smile. Anyone would have helped. I don't think just anyone would have helped like you did, Emily said gently. Not everyone takes the time to check everything twice, or offer a drink, or share their story. You didn't have to do any of that. Caleb unfolded the cloth slowly, almost shyly. Maybe, he admitted. But you were kind too. Most people don't stop and listen the way you did. Emily felt warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know what she had expected when she left home that morning. But she certainly hadn't expected this quiet bond, with a stranger in the middle of nowhere. The evening breeze picked up, stirring the dry grass. A soft silence settled between them, not uncomfortable but thoughtful. Emily glanced back at the ranch, its worn porch, the windmill spinning gently, the barn standing proudly in the fading light. It amazed her how something so simple could feel so inviting. Before I go, Emily said softly, can I ask something? Caleb nodded. Sure. Do you ever think about leaving here? She asked. Going somewhere else? Starting fresh? He looked down for a moment, thinking carefully. I've thought about it, he admitted. Especially after the fire. It felt like everything I worked for was disappearing. But this land, he gestured toward the fields. It's part of me. My family built this place. My dad taught me everything here. I guess I feel like I'm meant to stay, like there's still something left to do. Emily listened closely. His words were simple, but they carried weight. She realized that staying wasn't a sign of being stuck. It was a sign of love and loyalty. Caleb wasn't trapped by memories. He respected them. I understand, she said. It makes sense. He met her eyes again, and there was something new in his expression, a quiet appreciation, as if he was grateful she understood without judging. You're different, you know, he said, after a moment. Most people don't ask questions like that, or care about the answers. Emily smiled softly. I think everyone deserves someone to understand them, even just for a moment. Caleb looked at her for a long second, and Emily felt something warm and steady pass between them, an unspoken acknowledgement of the strange, gentle connection that had grown unexpectedly during the day. She cleared her throat, not wanting to make the moment too heavy. Well, she said, I should probably get going before it gets too dark. Yeah, Caleb said quietly. You should. They walked together toward the driver's side door. Emily placed her hand on the handle but didn't open it yet. She hesitated, looking back at him. Would it be okay if I check in with you sometime? She asked carefully. Just to see how you're doing? If you're okay? End quote. Caleb blinked, surprised. Then his expression softened, in a way that made Emily's heart tighten slightly. I'd like that, he said. If you want to. I do, she replied. He nodded, as if trying to hide how much those words meant to him. Then I'll give you my number. The service out here is terrible, but texting usually goes through. Emily took her phone from her pocket. Even though the signal at the ranch was weak, she typed his number into her contacts. The act felt small but meaningful, like anchoring this unexpected connection to something real before distance separated them. After saving the number, she looked at him again. Thank you, she said one last time. Caleb gave her a gentle smile, one that carried gratitude, respect, and something she couldn't name but felt strongly. Take care on the road, he said. And tell your sister I said hello. Even if she doesn't know who I am. Emily laughed softly. I will. She slipped into the truck and closed the door. For a moment, she just sat there, hands resting on the steering wheel, looking at Caleb standing outside. He stepped back, giving her space to pull out. As she started the engine, it hummed smoothly, a comforting sound. Emily rolled down the window. I'll message you when I reach the next town, she called out. I'll be here, he replied. She shifted into drive and gently pressed the gas. The truck rolled forward, turning slowly back onto the long, empty road. The ranch grew smaller in her rearview mirror, but the feeling it had given her warmth, peace, unexpected connection didn't fade. As she drove, The sky deepened into soft blues and oranges. The road stretched ahead, endless yet inviting. Emily felt lighter than she had earlier, as if the weight of her day, the worry, the heat, the broken engine had been replaced by something calmer and more hopeful. She glanced at her phone sitting beside her. Even though she didn't have signal yet, she felt comfort knowing Caleb's number was saved inside it. She hadn't known him long, but somehow, their shared afternoon had felt like a moment she was meant to experience, a reminder that the world still held surprises, kindness, and unexpected friendships. Miles passed beneath her wheels. The temperature gauge stayed steady. The hum of the engine was smooth and reassuring. When she finally reached the next town, colorful lights from small stores and diners glowed warmly against the darkening sky. She found a safe place to park and checked her phone. This time, she had full signal. Without overthinking, she typed, "Made it to the next town safely. Thank you again, Emily." She hovered over the send button for a second, then tapped it. A moment later, her phone buzzed. Caleb had replied, "Glad you made it. Drive safe." And, "It was good meeting you today." Emily felt a gentle smile spread across her face. She leaned back in her seat, feeling warm and peaceful inside. She didn't know where the road ahead would take her after New Mexico. She didn't know if she would ever come back to that ranch. But she did know one thing. Something good had happened that day. Something unexpected. Something that made the world feel a little kinder. Emily looked at the open road stretching beyond the town. The journey wasn't over, but she no longer felt alone on it. And somewhere far behind her, on a quiet ranch under the Texas sky, someone else felt the same.